What is good, guys? It's Rey-Jay back with another video, and in this one I want to break down what's going on with Tesla, SPY, Nvidia, the QQQ, and a couple of other tickers. I want to break down what's going on with the news affecting the market so far, what just happened with the PPI report, and all of this could affect the market going into the later hours for today. But before I break anything down about all this information, before I get into any more details, let me just mention a couple of things. I'm personally not a financial planner, so take nothing I say as financial advice. And also, if you guys can, please check out the Moomoo link, which is down below and in the description. If you sign up for Moomoo, the link down below, and deposit $100 into the account, you're guaranteed up to 5 free stocks. Now, the offer ends in just 4 days, so check it out before they run out. Anyways, let's break down what's going on with the market so far. Looking at the market, we're actually a little bit green during the pre-market for the time being, but the data that came out for today would technically be more bearish for the markets, so it's very important to watch our levels carefully and to be very, very careful. So let's go over this data that just came out. The PPI report came out this morning, which is a leading indicator for CPI, and this is showing signs of an increase in CPI once again. PPI month over month was 0.5%. That is hotter than what the consensus and the forecast were at just under like 0.4% or below that. The core PPI month over month was 0.3%. That is hotter than expected. The forecast consensus was 0.2%. So these two metrics month over month were hotter than expected. But what about year over year? Looking at core PPI year over year, it was 2.7%. That is hotter than what the forecast consensus happened to be at 2.2 to 2.3%. So core was a little bit hot right over here. And then PPI overall for all items year over year was 2.2%. That is also hotter than the consensus in the forecast of 1.6 to 1.7%. So PPI was hot, guys. This is not a good sign. Now, was it significantly hot? Not necessarily, just a little bit hotter than expected. But it's not the best of signs for the market going into the next CPI, which comes out tomorrow. So this is going to be very important. I think it's very important to be prepared for this and just to be ready for what's about to happen. Now, we also have some Fed speakers coming out later on. 45 minutes after the market opens, we have Waller giving a speech, then Bostic a little bit after that, and later on, we have the FOMC minutes. So it's very important to be careful, guys. I do have a risk and a warning of potential downside that could be coming to the markets because of that, but I'm going to talk more about that in just a minute. So yields are once again continuing to remain a little low as the market is trying to push up for the time being. But like I said before, I do have some warnings for everyone, which I will talk about in a couple of minutes. We're starting to see more developments in the war involving Israel. This is very important as well. We will see what happens as time goes on. Looking forward, we're starting to see new IPOs potentially coming out on the New York Stock Exchange known as Burke. Burke is coming out very, very soon. And then ExxonMobil has said it sealed a deal to buy Pioneer Natural Resources in an all-stock deal worth $60 billion. That's the biggest purchase since 1998. This is going to give them a bigger grip over fossil fuel production. So that is technically some positive news, at least for these like oil stocks and etc. And now the US House is trying to find a new speaker. So this is very interesting stuff, but nothing as crazy so far. Now, I'm going to break down what's happening with the charts, and that's why I have this warning for everyone. So, looking at SPY, okay, it's trying to bounce right here. And if this thing ends up holding above 436, it does have the potential technically to try to retest 437.5, maybe even 438, because you have to remember that on the daily charts on SPY, we have this gap that's unfilled. We are going to make an attempt to try to fill this gap at like 438. We could try, but I want to warn you all that, hey, even if we do try to fill the gap, there is a risk to the downside still coming later on as we have a rising wedge. Okay, the market is trying to bounce right now. It's making an attempt, so we will see if we get something like this, a little bounce like this before we end up sinking going into Thursday/Friday. This could even happen as soon as the FOMC minutes come out. A pullback that is going to be coming, or we could see us just like get one little pump to fill the gap in the 438, and then once we fill the gap, we just see this thing break this trend line. We haven't broken the trend line just yet. Okay, we haven't broken this bottom trend line just yet, so we're going to be waiting to see when that actually happens, and that's going to be a confirmation of this break to the downside. For now, the market's trying to pop, so we're going to be looking to see if SPY can break 437 again. If that breaks, watch 437.5, and if that breaks, there's potential for 438 to fill the gap all the way up in the mid of 438 before this thing rejects and starts cooling off. If we end up failing to get that high and we break below this trend line right here, we could see this thing just start sinking immediately all the way back down to like 431 or these lower levels. So watch that trend line very carefully. We will see what happens to the markets. When it comes to Tesla stock, Tesla's also pumping so far, but I just want to mention that Tesla has this gap down here at 264. We also have this very strong resistance. So if Tesla tries to pop at the market, we could see it try to retest 268. It's a possibility, but we have some very tight resistance here. So even if Tesla does try to pop more, I just want to remind you all we have this bearish divergence that has developed on the chart. And so far, it hasn't really played out yet, but if we push a little higher, this thing, it could still maintain the bearish divergence. That's the problem for the bulls, which tells me that there could be a reversal coming in the future. Now, could Tesla pop a little bit more towards 270? Yes, we can. I could see Tesla going to the 270s. It is a possibility, but my warning for everyone is that when the market starts turning, when SPY starts dropping, Tesla could start reversing too later on. So the reversal will affect Tesla in the future. It may not be affecting Tesla right now, but in the future, over the next day or two, we could see the market reverse, and that's going to slow Tesla down. So I just want to warn you about that. For now, right now, at the time I'm recording this, it's looking a bit more bullish. So if we break 266, watch 268, and if that breaks, 270 is on the table. If we break below 265, watch 264, 263.5. This 262.5 area, then 260 and 257.5. It looks like it's trying to pop a little bit. If it rejects off the key resistance, there could be more downside coming a little bit later as well. Now, what else is a big red flag for the markets would be the fact that if you look at Aapl, Aapl also is starting to break below its wedge, unless we have to like readjust this, because sometimes that happens where we get false breaks. So if you have to like redraw it like this, there could be like an attempt to come back up before it ends up dropping. But Aapl is starting to look weaker, whether we have to redraw this or not. Sometimes you have to do that, but it doesn't always happen that way. So Aapl is either going to get like a back test here, if we get one more pop, and then it starts sinking like this going into Friday or something, or this could be it. It might just fail to get much of a pop and just start sinking for now. So there is going to be some potential downside for Aapl coming, most likely, in my opinion. We're going to be watching to see if this thing can pop back, though. It's going to make an attempt to push first. Could it get up to 180? Depends on if you could break 179.5. It depends on if you could break this trend line again. It could pop a little bit more, but then there's going to likely be a big rejection coming downside back down to the 176.5 area as time goes on. I would say by Friday or so, there's a risk of that. So just be very careful, everyone. Apple still has that bearish divergence as well. For the QQQ, QQQ is still holding this rising wedge that's forming. We're seeing these all over the place. If this thing tries to bounce off this area, we could be watching for a retest of about 371. If it breaks that, watch 372.5 and 374 above that. There is a possibility we get one more pump and attempt to get back to 372 before we end up rejecting, or it could just start sinking. So if you want to know if we're going to be sinking or not, you have to be watching this trend line. Do we break this trend line or not? So far, we haven't broken it. So once we break below 368, that's going to be a bearish signal that this thing's going to start sinking towards 366 or so. So basically, there are two possibilities. We could pop a little bit more like this, right? And then eventually start sinking down over the next few days. Or what could happen is it's a very small pop. We actually don't pop that much. And then we just slowly kind of shuffle going to the FOMC minutes. Then we just start, sinking slowly after CPI and etc. come out. This is like the most likely possibility. So we will see how this ends up performing if we do end up breaking this trend line. So watch that for confirmation, and just know that that's how the charts are looking. There is potential downside. Finally, for Nvidia, I just want to mention that Nvidia is holding up quite nicely so far. We have a potential bullish wedge forming, so we could see Nvidia try to break towards 465 first. Could get very close to 465, and then we're going to see how it reacts to this resistance, as we have some tight resistance up there. We have this gap all the way up to about 467, so maybe Nvidia tries to break a little higher, but Nvidia may have a little bit more upside coming before we end up breaking down from this wedge. All right, so be very careful. Watch 462 as resistance, 465, and then 467. And then for support, watch this trend line. We will see if this thing holds or not for Nvidia. And if it breaks below this, watch support right back to where we are, potentially 457.5, 455, 451, and etc. All right, so could the market pop a bit more? Yes, it can. But just know that the PPI numbers were quite bearish, so be very careful with this pop. And on top of that, you're going to be watching these resistance levels very carefully. Can SPY pump above 437? And if it happens, there's a potential for 437.5 and then 438. Could be a little pop before this thing potentially starts sinking. Be prepared because there's so many rising wedges on throughout the entire market. So be very careful. I think the odds favor downside in the future. It doesn't have to start immediately. Market could hold up for the next day or so, but then be careful during the FOMC minutes. And don't forget that tomorrow we have CPI. So just be very, very careful, guys. And that's it. I thank you all so much for listening. All right. So have a great day. The market could pop a little bit more. Okay. But if we break these trend lines below, if we break below the rising wedges, downside could be imminent. I just want to warn you all about that. All right. Have a great day and peace out.